Greetings, folks. Welcome to the podcast on mental nutrition. I invite you to the table today because we have an intriguing entree for your mental nutrition delight. You can see we're joined by friend and colleague Fred Harburg, and I'll introduce Fred here in just a moment. So far in our podcasts, we've dealt with a number of topics. We had strength-based self-awareness, had positive brain, dealt with relationships, dealt with sleep, and the most recent one was on self-talk. What do we put into this delightful brain of ours? And all of them, as you're catching the flow of these podcasts, are oriented toward providing you, the listeners, the viewers, with what we're calling mental nutrition. As I said before, there's a lot of emphasis on physical nutrition. What do we eat? And that's critical. That's important. That impacts your brain, by the way. And so this is all about mental nutrition, helping you think healthy, which in turn helps you build yourself and build others. So I want to bring Fred on board here. Fred and I served on the faculty together at your United States Air Force Academy. He's actually a grad from that spot. And he putzed around the Air Force a bit, flying some airplanes, and got out and has traveled the world. And he has a whole list of accomplishments. You can look those up and you go, wow, what a guy. And that's exactly correct. However, the reason I asked him to join me on this podcast on happiness, our topic for today, is he's a quality human being, and that quality we will address. He knows the importance of what's critical in life, and given the topic, Fred, of happiness, a question off the top for you is happiness is it a worthy pursuit?
That's a great question. I want to back up for just a second to endorse what you're doing about mental nutrition. For 16 years, I was on the board of the Human Performance Institute in Orlando, Florida, with a colleague and dear friend and mentor, Jim Lair. And Jim, like you, is a renowned sports psychologist. He coached 16 number one in the world athletes and people you would know, Pete Sampras and Monica Seles and Arantxa Sanchez Vicario and Dan Jansen and on, like you, has the same sort of remarkable background that you do. And we placed a bunch of emphasis in our work over those years on physical fitness and on nutrition and kinesthetics and physiology. And what the studies found over the years was that more important than that was exactly what you're focusing on, their mental nutrition. It was mind state, it was the self-talk, the internal narrative that they had going on. It was the whole notion of their sense of purpose and value and their capacity to contribute to others that really made the difference. So I simply want to say to you, way to go, John. As you have all your career, you're on the most important dimension, the most important edge of this, and I just salute you. So your question is happiness, a worthy pursuit. Well, as a colleague of ours, Colonel Bill Rosenbach would say, as in all matters of social and behavioral psychology, it depends. It really depends on what you mean by happiness and how you pursue it. So, we could divide happiness into a couple of dimensions. Lubrimovsky talks about happiness, Sonia, in terms of the seeking pleasure, and then something that might be more like joy and deep fulfillment. And the latter is immensely worth pursuing, and there are so many studies that indicate the benefits personally, but also beyond self, to the pursuit of joy. But the pursuit of happiness, if you define that as pleasure, like eating M&Ms or something, will give you an immediate sense of gratification, but place you on something that psychologists call the hedonic treadmill, because it requires more and more and more of whatever that is, of love, sex, drugs, candy, glory from others, and there's just never enough. It's an fillable barrel.
Isn't it important? You speak of pleasure. If I seek pleasure for pleasure's sake,
right,
then I go down the rabbit hole a bit.
Yeah.
And it's I was reading an article on the neuroscience of happiness and pleasure, and the authors, a guy named Kringelbach and Berg.
Right.
I don't know them, but they in essence said that happiness doesn't stem from or spring from any single component. It does come from the interplay of higher pleasures, positive appraisals of meaning, social connectivity, of finding purpose. And I was struck for the listeners. Fred puts out what he calls a Monday morning momentum, which is a delightful treasure of information that causes you to think a little bit. And this morning, you actually, we're recording this on a Monday morning. So this morning you had a note there about how you've spent time helping people find what you call their core ethos, right, which for me is meaning, purpose, and you relate it to service.
Yep.
And then you also had a note in there about how a large percentage, probably I think you had 40% or so of people today, given COVID, given the politics, given the economy, everything that's going on, goodness gracious, all these issues, financial issues, relationship issues, mental issues, employment, and so on. How people are suffering from this. So part of our quest, you and I bouncing back and forth here a little bit, is how do we help these people move forward?
Yeah, I don't think it's complicated. I think it's pretty simple, but I think it's hard because we're often so preoccupied with what's going on with ourselves. I certainly am. I mean, I'd be disingenuous to say I'm just altruistic and I'm out there helping other people all the time. So I'll talk about you instead. And I've observed about your help with people in your community, not merely your friends, because I went through some significant challenges. I mean, cancer twice of two pernicious types, and a very serious setback with a heart issue. And in each of those cases, you were more than ready to reach out to me and to try to encourage and help in any way you could. And I've seen it with a number of our colleagues who you know very well, who went through trauma, but beyond that, with veterans. So I've seen you again and again, John, reach out in a way to genuinely be of help to others. I don't want to embarrass you or make you feel good. If it does, it's not my fault. But the fact is that it's not complicated, but it is hard because it requires, what a psychologist would call this discretionary effort, or this capacity to overcome friction, the friction of ennui, the friction of continuing to do what we're doing, and the friction of comfort of being on the couch and watching Netflix. So, the key is to recognize need in others and in simple ways reach for them in ways that are meaningful. And again, I have observed you do that again and again.
Well, it's very kind. Thank you. And I do my best to reach out to folks that have cancer, and just have a chat and listen. And it's interesting. You say there's two thoughts running in my head, and one deals with the aspect of self-compassion.
Right.
And I remember some time ago, I was in this funk, where boy, oh boy.
All of us are.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I told myself, John, what are you doing feeling lousy? I mean, you're supposed to be somebody that helps lift people up and get them rolling and feel good about themselves. And here you are, feeling miserable. And so, what I did is I sat down and I took a pad of paper and I started writing what was going on with me at that moment. And when I finished writing, it took, a little bit of time, half an hour or whatever. And I looked at that list and I said to myself, John Anderson, you are right where you're supposed to be. Mm. If you are feeling good right now, there's something wrong with you because you have all these things going on.
Yeah.
Now, these things will pass. You're going to find a way to take care of them.
Yeah.
Then you'll start feeling better when the time is right.
Yep.
And I, in essence, gave myself permission to feel lousy with the caveat that I'm going to move on.
Wow, I think that's such an important point, because the fact is that human beings oscillate between emotions. Every human being does. I work, as you do, with a lot of CEOs, and the data show that 70% of them suffer from the so-called imposter syndrome. Well, it's actually not a syndrome. It's a phenomenon. A syndrome has a more technical description, but we'll call it the imposter syndrome. And if 30% don't, I think those 30% are lying, because I think 100% of people feel like imposters at some time. I certainly have in my life, and I'm not immune from feeling that way in the future. I'm unqualified in many ways to be here talking with you now. But the fact is that that's true of all human beings, and overcoming that and offering, as you say, that some self-compassion, some appreciation for the fact that all of us are going to feel like we're not qualified, or we don't have everything that is required to be of help in this situation, or all the knowledge needed. The truth is we don't. So the fact is we're doing the best we can. And we'll have those dips when we descend to a nadir, and then we'll come back up. I love, one of my favorite books in 2013 was Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman. It's a tome. I'm not saying that everyone should go out and buy Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, but I loved it. And he talked about something that really struck home with me. It was about training of pilots. And the notion was, what would be the greatest help in training pilots to be really effective? And so he interviewed hundreds of people who, like I, had been a flight instructor. And across the board, vast majority, I think 80% said, oh, the key to being a good flight instructor is to scream at the students. And he went, excuse me?
What?
Yeah. He said, could you say that again? You said, oh, yeah. Every time I scream at the students, their next flight is better. And he said, that can't be. Everything, he was an educational psychologist, and he said, everything I know about instruction is you don't scream at students and they get better. And so he went out and he did the data, because he's a data hound. He's a Nobel Prize winner and amazing. And guess what? It was exactly true. Every time that a pilot had a terrible flight and the instructor screamed at him, the next flight was better. And he scratched his head and he said, this is contrary to everything I know. And he dug deeper into the data and studied it over time. And he said, hey, what about when they give positive? And after they gave, yeah, that was great, that was a great flight, the next flight was worse. And he went, oh my gosh, this is completely contrary to what my personal beliefs, observation. And as they studied the data, he realized what he was seeing was a regression to the mean. Then, in fact, it's exactly what you're talking about. That over time, pilots get a little better, but they have bad flights and they have good flights. And inevitably, after a really bad flight, their next flight will be better, no matter what a person screams. And so he said, he did a third experiment. He said, just be quiet. Don't give them praise. Don't scream at them. Just acknowledge what they did and how it went without any emotion. And that was the best. They just, because people have a natural mechanism for learning, and if they want to get better at something, they do so. So, back to where you started this, that idea of a little self-compassion, we're going to have down times. That comes with the assignment of human being.
Yeah, there's an individual that you and I both know of, a young lady named Laurie Santos.
Absolutely.
Laurie's a professor at Yale.
Yeah.
And she has what she calls a happiness lab. And for you listeners and viewers, it's a freebie.
Yeah.
You can go online and
it's great.
And enter Happiness Lab Laurie Santos, and she'll give you some lessons. And
yeah.
And you know what? One of the reasons that I really like Laurie, I mean, she is so much more in depth than I am in this happiness arena, but she says, you might think you know what it takes to lead a happier life, more money. An old colleague of ours who recently passed, unfortunately, a brilliant man, David Campbell. Yeah. David says, you don't need money to make you happy, but it sure helps buy the things that do make you happy. David was a tremendous wit, and we miss him. Laurie says, more money, a better job, vacations, all these things, your toys at the house. And then she'll just look dead at you and say, you're dead wrong.
Yeah.
About all those things. And a lot of us, think about all these things that will truly make our lives better. And it's the opposite of that. And when you follow her, you see all these things that she talks about.
What's interesting, John, both her research and the research of others points to the fact that it's acts of altruism, acts of appreciation expressed to others. It's acts of service to others that are the real key to sustained happiness, as opposed to this. It's not that there's something wrong with pleasure. I mean, I like an ice cream cone as much as the next person, but when you eat 4 buckets of ice cream, it's not that much fun, and
unless it's Praline and cream and Cherry Jubilee. Yeah,
that's right. But The interesting thing about Lori's research and others is that even when you do acts of service and expression of gratitude and appreciation for others for the wrong reason, you do it because it'll make you look good, or you do it because it makes you feel good in the instant, or feel better about yourself. Over time, you stop doing it for the wrong reason and start doing it for the right reason. It infects you because it is so rewarding intrinsically for itself that it's transformative in its capacity. So yeah, I think I think that's so wise.
Well, we've talked about, what happiness might be. That in fact it depends
Yeah.
Somewhat, and I like to ask people. In fact, I do on the self-talk
Yeah.
piece that preceded this podcast. I did this incomplete sentence thing, and I asked people to complete this following sentences, and I'd make a statement like, "My home life is,"
Yeah.
and I'd
Yeah.
pause so you could complete that sentence. "Spiritually, my life is."
Yeah.
I'd pause. And one of them was, "I am most happy when."
Yeah.
And then I said in fact, the final one was, "My purpose in life is."
Yeah.
And on the happy one and the purpose one, I said, if hopefully you were able to respond to those statements and to pay attention to that. So I like to ask people, when are you happy? What makes you happy? Do you allow yourself to be happy?
That's great.
And some folks don't.
Yeah.
They're very absorbed in, but I've got to make more money, or
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time making ends meet.
Yep.
That sort of thing.
Or I'll be happy when, conditionally on these conditions.
Yeah, I go back to the couple of earlier podcasts on like the positive brain, for example. And I tell people that when you have that kind of emphasis on positivity, and I'll go back to your words, Fred, where, we are cyclical.
Yep.
We aren't, I don't always wake up and, oh, wow, I'm so happy. What a great day.
I'd worry about you.
Yeah, that's right. And throughout the day, we have our roller
For
coaster
sure.
where we go up and down. And people, that's normal.
That's
You're not
right.
crazy.
That's right.
And that's back to what you and I both said. Allow yourself some of that self-compassion.
Yep.
And I'd like us to move here. We'll roll for another 5 or 10 minutes. I'd like us to move into some of the different things that you can do.
Yep.
Now you talk just a bit more about the gratitude, because
Yep.
there's 2 or 3 that really hit me, and
Yep.
gratitude is a big one. Relationships
Yep.
are a huge one. So tag, you're in.
Yeah, well, we could categorize sort of all of them under the broad label of pro-social behavior, and pro-social behavior has many dimensions, both toward self and toward others. So there's intrapersonal pro-social behavior, and there's interpersonal social behavior. And so when you talk about self-compassion, that's the case of that intrapersonal, where you're just demonstrating a little pro-social behavior toward yourself, where you're recognizing things that you do well, giving yourself some grace when you make a mistake, asking for self-forgiveness, and treating yourself to things that give you pleasure, that give you a sense in reason, that give you joy, to doing those kinds of things for you. And then the interpersonal kinds of things, and most important, your mention of gratitude is it's a high act of pro-social intrapersonal behavior to say, wow, I have an immense amount to be thankful for. You know, the list that you made. And some people, I'm not the first, say that one of the greatest things you can do is before you go to sleep, just identify a few things for which you're grateful. The best research about that is that doesn't work if you repeat the same list over and over. Like, I know, John, that you're thankful for your kids. And I know that you're really thankful for your grandkids. And I know someday, you know, when you pass 40, 50 years of age, you're going to be even more thankful for your great grandkids.
Got one coming here.
I know. That's great. But if it's just, boy, I'm thankful for my kids, I'm thankful for my kids, the brain doesn't operate that way. It just, John, move on. We got it. So it has to be very specific. And if you're going to do that gratitude exercise that many people have recommended before you sleep, it's about things that are fresh and new. So about John Jr., what did he do today that particularly struck you and for which you're grateful? So that's a simple act. On the interpersonal, you know, the research on friendships is immense. That the fact that you and I are still connected after all these years, after all the terrible things I've done, that's amazing.
You could give Fred a hard time.
No, that's a huge positive act of pro-social interpersonal, reaching out to friends and connecting with them in meaningful ways. Expressing appreciation for what they've done, recognizing their contributions and contributing to them, this notion of contribution, you know. So I could just go on, and I know we have limited time, but again, this is not complicated, but it takes some effort.
Simplicity, if I may, the simplicity of that. You, half an hour ago, you said, you know, happiness doesn't have to be complicated. It can be simple. Not always easy.
That's right.
And yet it can be simple. And the gratitude thing, you know, there's quite a bit of research that if you simply do what you just said, have some variety each day, and if you only jot down, if you actually write down, I mean, if you're not going to write it down, then at least say it.
Yep.
3 gratitudes.
Yep.
That's it.
That's it.
3 gratitudes. You're very thankful for. You can go 1, 2, 3. Your kids.
Yeah, for sure.
And there, you know, and different things they do. You said something, Fred, very simple. You mentioned having an M&M.
Yeah.
You know, a little piece of candy.
Yeah.
And for that instant, you're thankful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. So let me run down a list here.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to ask you to comment.
Sure.
And I just started jotting down ideas to promote happiness. And the first one is write down what you're thankful for, gratitudes. Yep. So we've talked about that. I put go on a hike, explore nature, exercise, sleep, get your 7+ hours of sleep.
Yep.
Meditate, like mindfulness. I do that every day.
Yep.
Think about what makes you happy and do more of that.
Yep.
Give, volunteer, build and sustain relationships, have a hobby, smile. Here's something I stumbled on yesterday. Somebody said, if they're having a hard time with a smile, and I'll have you do it. You don't have a hard time with a smile. But you say the letter E.
E. Someone said, put a pencil in your mouth.
There you go. For those of you who are listening, Fred just looked like I don't know what pencil coming out of his mouth there, side to side. Spend time with happy people. And one that I haven't seen a lot of research on are songs, music. I was listening to an oldies. I love my oldies.
Yeah.
And an old singer, a guy named Perry Como.
Yeah.
You know, he was singing Magic Moments.
Yeah.
And that's actually going to be the title of a future podcast.
Cool.
songs and movies. So that's just a big laundry list. Your thoughts on
Yeah,
all?
well, just starting backwards with that last one, there actually is a lot of research on music and emotion. As it turns out, music goes right to the amygdala and stimulates emotion. It's an emotional language. So, different music for different people, which I would say about your entire list is really important to think about. The fact that what makes one person happy does not necessarily make another person happy.
Bingo.
So we could make a list 10 times as long with great ideas, but for me to think about, well, this makes John happy, that would make me happy, maybe. Yeah, maybe because we have different history, different construct, different lens that we see the world through,
For
and
sure.
being really attentive. So I guess the one in that list that you said was think about what makes you happy. I would emphasize. When I was president of Motorola University, and the first year that I took that job, we lost $4.5 billion. You lose 4.5 billion here, 4.5 billion there. After a while, you're talking real money, and and so it was like, whoa, welcome to your job. And so my job really became one to figure out how to close the largest corporate university in the world at that time, to move it from 1,800 people to 20. It was the hardest thing I ever did. There was not a lot of happiness involved in that, of walking veterans to the door. But I went to a psychiatrist to seek some help, not just for me personally, for all our executives and workers who lost everything. They lost their life savings. They watched everything, all their dreams that they worked for years and years go down the tubes. And I said, man, what should I do? And he said, well, first, what are you feeling? And I said, I'm fine, and he said, no, I asked, what are you feeling? I said, what? I didn't ask how you doing. That's actually not a question. That's a greeting. Like, how you doing? Fine. How you doing? Fine. It's like, you could say anything. The tulips.
Yeah.
He said, I asked, what are you feeling? I said, what am I feeling? I have no idea what I'm feeling. What are you feeling? What's anybody feeling? And he said, yeah, see, that's the problem. If you're going to help those executives feel happier, let's say, you better know what you are feeling, because you can't help somebody else unless you know how you're doing and specifically what you are feeling. So I really like your idea of thinking about, John, thinking about what makes you happy. First, you would have to recognize, what's it like when I'm happy? What is that? I mean, physically, emotionally, in terms of the self-talk that's going through my head, what is happiness to me? And then after that, what triggers that for me? In what circumstances, what conditions, with what kind of people? Does it make me happy to be around energy vampires, in my life? Or, with whom do I surround myself when I feel that thing I call happiness? So I just emphasize that it's different for everyone, and knowing what it is for you is absolutely essential.
Yeah, and that's a good place for us to wrap up here. I know, perhaps a closing statement. That your statement is a wonderful closing statement, and I would say that happiness, for me, results in each of us, when we're feeling happy, having a productive purpose in life, like
Hmm.
to give, to help others grow. I mean, that's, my
That
purpose, to give.
you bet.
And in addition, uh, results in reliable, productive social connectivity that you talked about, both interpersonally and intrapersonally, the relationships in our life. And it helps develop or build this positive brain, which equates to having productive self-talk, and which contributes to us being able to express gratitude.
Mhm.
And I mentioned earlier, getting sufficient sleep. It's a large percentage of the nation right now has a hard time with sleep, the second most medical challenge that we find right now. So all of those things, people, hopefully you got a thought or two about happiness from my esteemed colleague here, Fred. And Fred, thank you so much for being a part of this. I look forward to involving you down the road some.
Well, my pleasure. And I want to end where I started. I just salute you, John, for doing this. I know you're making $1 million off of this.
That would be zero.
I know. And that's the whole topic today, because it is your purpose to give. And I just really appreciate you for all you've given to me personally, and that you're giving to people who tune into this. Just keep it up, man.
Well, I intend to do that. And folks, thanks for sitting at the table today. Hopefully our main entree, happiness, was tasty for you. And in that capacity, upcoming podcast, we're actually going to do one on prayer. Fascinating topic, optimism. I mentioned the comment magic moments, where we will talk about what are some of those songs, those movies that kind of fire up the old amygdala and release some of that dopamine to make us feel good. So thanks for tuning in, Fred. Thanks for being a part of this, and we'll talk to you on the next podcast. See ya.
All the best.